So you need to paint up Poxwalkers. Perhaps you've picked up the Combat Patrol for Death Guard, which is a really nice combat patrol with lots of models. Unfortunately, 30 of those lots of models happen to be Poxwalkers. Now, I really do like the sculpts of Poxwalkers. I've got a lot of the Nurgle details, ripped flesh, boils, tentacles, all of that sort of thing. But we don't really want to be spending 6 hours per model when there is 30 of them. So what we're going to be doing today is focusing on a scheme that we can do really quickly and efficiently, and we get this really nice outcome on the models. What I'd be interested is you commenting down below with how long you think it's going to take for us on average per model to get to this point. And then at the end of the video, once we've gone through and worked out how long that was, let us know by editing or revising that comment with a note of how far off you actually were. Overall, I think that'd be really interesting. I think these came out really nice. And without further ado, let's jump into painting them. All of the models were built as per the instructions. And while there is a lot of scope for conversion in this project, a lot of it's about speed. So we decided to try and add some variance in with the painting, which we will start to achieve first off by varying our undercoat. We can split the models into groups of 10, and then we can prime them in a combination of colors. One group getting a prime in red, the other blue, and finally a group in brown. From there, we can start to build out the skin tones and things like that across the model, which we'll achieve by taking a dark, warm flesh tone and applying a heavy overbrush technique across all of the models. The intention here is to cover most of the raised areas, with this overbrush leaving essentially the coloured undercoat in the recesses. From there, we can undertake another overbrush, but this time we're going for a slightly lighter flesh tone, and we're going to be applying it in a lighter overbrush application, as well as it being a lighter colour in itself. This will be applied in mainly a top-down stroking manner, intending to replicate light impacts across the model, giving us a nice transition from our undercoat through these two skin tones. Once we've done these two layers of undercoating, we are closely approaching the 50-minute mark. And as you can see from the actual two colors that we've got, they are skin tones that are more in the brown, yellowish realms. And that is good to start off with, because what that means is we've now got a base point at which we can come in with some washes and tint our past stages. What we're going to be doing is trying to replicate different sorts of effects on the skin, and we're going to be doing that with a combination of a blue wash, a red wash, as well as a green wash, using them in different areas across the model. We have the option to either apply these washes randomly, or we can follow a set methodology. Naturally, we're going to be doing the latter, and starting off with a blue wash on all of the extremities. This means giving a wash over any of the hands, the feet, the legs, the arms that are exposed, and have not been transformed into a tentacle. They can get a nice blue wash, and what this will do is start to imply that cold blood loss effect, similar to frostbite. Once the blue is down, we can move across to our red wash, and we're going to be using this one to replicate and show soreness and rubbing on the skin, which means that anywhere that we see a nice saggy fold of skin, or can foresee a lot of motion with the model moving, that can get a nice coat of red wash. Finally, we're going to add another additional color change, and here we're going to take a bright green wash and use this on all of the heads of the models, as well as any of the Nurgle related aspects. So these are things like the spikes, the spines, and the tentacles. This is where one of the actual advantages of batch painting comes out, because washes can take a little bit of time to dry, but because we've got 30 models, we can be relatively confident that as long as we weren't too heavy-handed, any wash that we applied on the first model will most likely be dry by the time we have finished applying the wash to the last model. However, this is probably the area that does require the longest amount of time to be left to dry, so why not take the opportunity to hit the subscribe button, grab a cup of tea, and then come back once it is dry. At the drying stage, with the washes completely sorted, we are closely approaching the 145 mark across the entire 30 models, and this is how they look at the moment. As you can see, we've got the color hues from the washes that we've done, built on top the skin tone and the nice hue of shadows that we've got from the primed recesses that are either going to be brown, blue, or red, and this adds some color difference across the models, even though the following stages were all the same. Jumping back to the model, we are going to push them a little bit further and add a little bit more brightness. We're also going to start to desaturate the skin out a little bit, And to do this, we're going to dry brush the model with a medium dry brush and a khaki colour. We want to be catching all of the elements on the models, and this should nicely pick out all of the raised details, adding yet another stage of highlight to our skin while bringing consistency back to the areas that we tinted with the wash. This is then going to be followed up with another round of dry brushing, but this time we're going to want to grab a very pale bone tone and then use this across the model. Similar to the lighter flesh, we're applying this dry brush lighter than the last and mainly focusing from the top of the model downwards, giving us a nice replication of light hitting the model. When we are going around and doing these dry brushes, with the first one, which is the khaki, we don't have to be as careful. We don't need to worry about the robes, anything like that. We want to make sure that we get a decent amount of coverage. We want to make sure we get the shadows, the underarms and things like that with this dry brush. What it's going to do is give us that overall harmony that we don't get from the second dry brush, which is only going to be hitting the models from the top down to give us that bright point of light hitting the flesh. So therefore, the combination of both of these dry brushes in that way give us that nice transition on top of the work we've already done. And it also means that it sets the stage nicely for our next step, which is to, one, harmonize the work that we've done so far and bring it into a green Nurgle tone, as well as remove the texture that we've just achieved from dry brushing on the model. And as you may expect, that is going to be applied with washes. We are going to take a dirty green wash and we want to apply this with a healthy coat across all of the areas of skin and Nurgle features on the model. So this includes the tentacles, the spines and the spikes. We will need to slightly babysit this stage as we don't want any excessive pooling in the joints of the models. But once we have the wash applied and it's dried on all of the model's skins, it should have shifted them nicely into a diseased mottled green tone, and then we can move across to look at the clothing. And for speed and for ease, we're going to be keeping it nice and simple. So we're going to start off with a quick base coat brown of a contrast. This will coat all of the clothing, be it a boot or a shirt. From here, once the contrast is applied and dry, we can add in some rough texture to the clothing by applying a heavy dry brush using a sandy brown tone. What this will do is pick out all of the raised edges as well as adding a little bit of striking texture on the flatter surfaces. This can then all be finished off with a nice quick tint job in the same vein as our skin, except we're going to be shifting this from a green into a red. Applying a red wash will tone all of the brighter surfaces more red, while leaving the details on the clothing a red hue brown. We can also take this as an opportunity to go in and apply this red wash over the tentacles once the green wash has dried, meaning that we are giving a nice simulation of the worn wriggly Nurgle flesh tentacles. By applying this red wash over the browns, I find that we get a nice effect because we end up tinting the lighter brown dry brush that we did over the top, giving us a nice mottled, worn red look, but we don't get the often staining effect you get from putting wash over fabric style surfaces because of the darker brown in the recesses that hides a lot of that sort of colouring. Therefore, we get a really nice mottled effect without a lot of work, and it's not now just a neutral brown, there is a little bit of colour in there as well. Which means that we can actually move on to some of the other areas, and what we're going to tackle now is all of the metals, the weapons and things like that. And these were essentially base coated in the same brown contrast as the clothes and everything that we've done so far. So do it at the same stage as that, and then once that brown contrast is dry on all of the metals, we can actually dig out some brassy gold tones and get to work. We can take our brassy bronzy tone and then overbrush this across all of the weapons and metal parts. Make sure to include the spiked nails into the model and anything like buckles, clasps and things like that. This is a relatively quick process because we are overbrushing. Once it's done, we're essentially going to repeat the step but in a slightly narrower fashion using a silver. And what this will do is add some bright spots across the area, showing wear and tear and chipping on all of this metal. Once we've been around the model and applied all of the silver overbrushing, we are sitting at roughly 5 hours and 50 minutes. And this is how the model's looking. So I think what we can do is add a few more stages before we finish them off. So far, as I said, we are sitting at just shy of the 6-hour mark. And by far the longest part of the process was the applying of brown contrast over all of the fabrics, clothes, boots, things like that. And the main reason for that is because we needed to be careful to not cover any of the work that we've already done. But with that done, the rest of the steps aren't that bad, and we're at 6 hours, which overall is quite impressive in my mind so far anyway. With that in mind, let's add a little bit of definition and a little bit of difference to the Nurgle parts across the models. So I'm thinking all the Nurgle tree branches. We can add a little bit of change there by grabbing a brown wash. We want to take this brown wash and use it to coat all of the areas that we've painted with metallics. This will first off remove any of the shine from the weapons, as well as give it a nice old decaying look. While we have this out, we can also hit any of the areas of Nurgle's woodwork across the models. Hitting it with this wash will help to change its tone and make it look semi-wood-like, while also picking out all of its lovely sculpted details. With this done, the guys look relatively fantastic, and we are sitting at just gone 6 hours. So let's stretch it a tiny bit further and do some quick details, which will be painting the eyes as well as all of the boils. And we're going to tackle this in a nice, quick, simple way, and that will be with the layer application of a pale yellow. And what we want to do is use this to catch any visible eyes across the model, but more importantly, we want to put a drop of this yellow in the center of any of the large, easy to reach boils on the model to show that sickening fluid beneath. After half an hour of painting yellow, we come to a final time of 6 hours and 36 minutes. And overall, I really like how this came out, and I think that time is quite surprising. We were able to get a decent amount of variance across all of the models because of the using of separate undercoats. Some are slightly warmer than others, while they all look completely cohesive. So here's the show reel, here's how they came out and how they look. And if we do the maths, it apparently turns out that we spent approximately 13 to 15 minutes on each of these models, which I think is really impressive for how good they look on the tabletop, and kind of takes the sting out of the batch painting that we had to do. Now, if you want to see how we're going to paint up the other models from the Combat Patrol, what I would suggest is subscribing because that video isn't out yet. However, if you want to see how to paint up some Chaos because you are interested, why not check out this video here, which is where we paint up a Chaos Lord in the Black Legion colour scheme, which might be interesting for you if you have Chaos. Otherwise, do remember to subscribe so that we can see you next time.